So in this video I'm going to be shortening the tail shaft section of this gearbox. Now the owner has fitted this in a single seater super stock, and when it's installed in the car the seat actually fits kind of there, so they can't get the gear sticking anymore. So the gear stick has got to be realistically about here. That's where they want it. So I've got to shorten this whole section, which means taking out quite a bit of a chunk of the casting. I've got to separate this top bit from the bottom and try and relocate it all lined up so obviously the gears still work. Inside here is obviously a steel shaft, which has got to have exactly the same removed out of it so the gears still line up. So I think the first thing to do, strip it all down, get the select shaft out of the way, and then I can start measuring and scribing where I want to make my cuts. Okay, so this is the shaft runs up along the side, and you can see it comes through to the other end. There's a little ball bearing in here with a spring, so every time this moves it locates in one of these notches just to hold it into gear. So we've got to take this roll pin out. I'll tap that out, but I don't want to lose it in the bottom of the gearbox because I've always got to strip it to get it out. So I'm just going to try and I'll put this magnet in underneath it. Somehow. So, and hopefully when I tap that pin out, I'm just going to use a punch to knock that out. I won't lose it. There's a little roll pin there. Lucky I didn't drop that. Get that, put that to one side. So now I've got to get there's a back plate off. Back plate off just in here. And then hopefully that will allow the shaft to come right the way out. Right. It's not a ball bearing, it's a little block of bronze dome ended thingy. What's it? So now the shaft should slide right out all the way through. And select that hub. Just going to get that one as well. Okay, so now the shaft's out, we can safely start scribing and cutting that out without you know, cutting through anything we don't need to. So there's actually a bit of a webbing in here which we'll have to cut out as well, and somehow there's a very thin gap here. I need to leave the bottom oil seal housing in for the prop shaft and try and somehow just cut this top section off through here, and then all the way through the side up to there. So I'm going to scribe it all out and then get cutting. got to try and cut through here. I don't know where you can see it, but there's literally the thickness of that cutting disc. So if I cut through there, I'm going to lose the ability to put this seal back in, which is obviously we need to keep that to stop the gear oil coming out. So I think what I'm going to do is cut higher up into here, and then when I weld this all back on further up, I can make this up with some weld and then file that back out to get the end cap back in there. So probably what I have to, there's just not enough room to cut through that. It's about 2mm. So I'll cut off slightly higher. I'm going to have to build it out with some weld. So yeah, now I've got to try and cut through all of this around here and back up to there and just take that bit off. Okay, so I'll just show you what I've done. Managed to not go through anywhere, so we're not going to leak any oil. Seal's still intact. Obviously got to clean all this off flush. I'm going to need to trim out quite a bit of that. Obviously needs to sit down like that to allow this shaft to line up. So trim out a lot of this, get it all level, and then see if we can line it all up. Obviously this bit here is going to be a bit of a problem where I've gone through because it was so thin. That's just going to need building up with some weld, and then I'll have to probably use a little die grinder or something, or a file to make that rounder, you know, to put the cap back in the end, but I think it should be alright. So yeah, we'll get all this cleaned up. Obviously when we got to weld this cast, the cast's horrible to weld anyway. There'll be contamination and all sorts of junk embedded in it, but I can get as much of it off as I can. Okay, so I've got it all cleaned up. You really need to, when you're welding cast aluminium, you need to get rid of this dark grey anodised. You can see the, you know, the clean line down here where I've cleaned up and where I haven't. That grey oxidisation layer is actually takes a lot more heat to melt that than it does the aluminium underneath it. So sometimes you'll find if you don't get that off properly, you'll be heating up the aluminium for ages. It won't seem to appear to be melting, but underneath it, it all falls away. So that's the most important thing. I mean, you're never going to get all of it out. It doesn't matter what tactics people say they use and different ways they use to weld in cast. It's embedded in it. Right from when they very first made the castings and they poured the aluminium, there'll be contaminations embedded all the way through it. So don't worry too much, just clean it up like you would anything else really. A few things I use to clean them up is I've got these I don't even know what they're called really. The little row lock pads. If you're going to use these, make sure you keep these separate. Only use them because you can see they've got bits of aluminium embedded in them. But if you've used this on steel or plastics or anything else, and then you use it on here, it will contaminate it. So just keep these for aluminium only. Same with if you're using these little sort of 36 grit. You can see, probably might be able to see that the metal gets embedded in them, and then if you use it on here, the same thing's going to happen. So even with a file, sandpaper, scotch pad, anything, just try and keep it all separate. So I'll show you what we've got here. This now fits just inside. So we're going to weld straight around there, straight along the bottom, and then that gap that I made earlier, I'm going to have to weld that on the back there. So, but to line it all up, what I think I'm going to do is put the shaft back in. That's going to go through there, and then I can use that to line up and get that exactly where I want it. So I think I'll get it quickly lined up off camera, put a couple of tacks on it to hold it. But I don't want to weld it right up until I've put the whole thing together and I've got the you know, the gear stick in. I can run it through the gears, make sure everything's all right. So tack this together, then I'll cut the shaft down, which I'll do on the lathe in a minute, and then I can put it all together. Once I know all the gears and everything are right, then I'll weld the whole lot up separately. So that's the plan. Okay, so I've got it all lined up exactly where I think I want it. I'm just going to put a small tack here, one on the back, maybe one down the front there, and that'll be enough just to hold it while I assemble it with the shortened shaft in it. Put the gear stick in, make sure I've got all the gears and all that, and then I can take it apart and weld round it properly. So see how it tacks. Another thing to mention is there's actually a plastic bush in here. So if you are going to do one of these, they're kind of clipped in. If you didn't know it was there and you started welding, then you'd melt it. I have still got it in there because it's the only way to really line the shaft up. So got to be very careful, put a very small tack on that bit, and just hope I don't melt it. Okay, so you can see a very small tack there. Most of it was on the top. I literally just touched into this bit because that's where the plastic bush is. Got a tack down the front here, and then one in the back. You can see that. So now that's old solid shaft move. You know, came out freely. The plastic bush. Don't know if you'll be able to see up in there. That is the plastic bush just there. Can't get it out. I'll have to hook that out or something, so it doesn't look like I melted that. So yeah, next thing is to cut the shaft down. Okay, so I've got the selector shaft just clamped down onto the table, just stop it moving around. And what I want to do is put a scribe line exactly halfway the thickness of it all the way down. So when I cut it in half, obviously I've got to get the orientation between this end and the, you know, this bit on that end exactly the same. And also there's a hole there, so if I don't get them lined up perfectly, then you know everything's going to be, all the selectors won't line up or anything. So I just want to score it all the way down dead straight, and then that way I've always got that reference just to, you know, when I weld it back together. So set my height gauge. This is exactly half the diameter of that tube, so I'm just going to use the corner of it to scribe along the bottom edge. see that on camera, but no. There is. So yeah, there's a scribe line all the way down there. Now when I cut that in half, I'm going to be able to just marry the two lines up and know that it's where it was to start with. Okay, so I've got it set up in the lathe, but I've got a few problems, mainly due just to the size of my lathe and, you know, it's the capabilities of it. Normally when I would join two bits of pipe together, I don't know if I can show you, I would cut the section out I want, leave a kind of cone shape either side, line them up in, you know, between the two centres and weld them together, and then you can clock just to make sure you've got it straight. The problem is with this selector shaft is it's got a bent end on it, therefore that can't go right the way through far enough to make my join. My join's going to be around here somewhere, which means I've got to turn the shaft around, which means this bent end here will be over here, and obviously I can't fit that in my live centre. So to try and line them both up, I've come up with this sort of solution where I've made all these shims exactly the right side. I've got a V block, and that's going to fit up underneath to get the height and the right axis right. So the plan is, once I've cut it, I'll put the other piece here in that groove, so hopefully that lines it up, and then I can start TIG welding it together. I don't know if it's going to work, but I've just clocked it up on here, and actually it's not particularly straight before I've started, as you can see. So if I can get it somewhere close to that, then I think I'll be happy, considering I can't use the normal method. So let's get it cut in half. Right, so this is what I've finally come up with to try and keep these two in line. If you can see, I've got the V block set up underneath. It's all spaced up with these bits of different bits of plate and stuff to try and get the exact right height, and then obviously it keeps it in line that way. And I've got the tailstock propping it up there, so it's pretty straight. I won't be able to clock it up until afterwards, obviously, but I'm just going to get some small tacks all the way around right in the very centre there, and then I can start rotating it. Okay, so I've got it all welded up. It was a bit more tricky than I thought, because every time you heat one side of the pipe, it wants to bend the opposite direction. So you have to be quite tactful welding side to side before you can go all the way around. But I've got it pretty straight. I've obviously got shave the welds down. But I think we're actually, I don't know if you can see that, better than we were before marginally. So it's definitely no worse. Anyway, so I'm pretty happy with that. I'm gonna just grind down, run the lathe over these and just cut that off smooth so it's all, and any low bits I'll just fill in with some weld. But yeah, it runs nice and true, so hopefully if we've got everything lined up right, we should be good for changing gear. So I'm going to get this quickly cut up, put it back in the gearbox, and then we'll trial the gears. Right, so I've got it all set up ready to weld. I did just try the shaft in, and it lines right up through, so I didn't bother showing you that. So now, literally, the last job to do is weld all around this. As for settings, whenever I'm welding cast, I tend to like to have it on max and just use the pedal. Because you'll find with aluminium, you'll need to vary the temperature quite a lot. Sometimes it'll get way too hot and you'll have to back off. Just depends on how thick the castings are, if there's any strengtheners and stuff like that. So I'm on 95 hertz, like I say, on the pedal, 2.4mm rod. I've got some 3.2mm rod where I might need to go down to fill in the big areas in there. Like I said before, don't expect too much from cast. It's always going to be, you know, this is a 50-year-old casing and it's got years and years and years of oxidisation layers. It's had oil in it its whole life. All you can do is clean it off the same as you do any other aluminium, but it's not going to be the prettiest of welds. So while you're welding it, just make sure you get good penetration, and don't worry too much about what it looks like. It's not a fuel tank or anything that's got to look amazing. So it's just got to get the job done. Okay, so it's all welded up. I did, once I welded it, I just went over the whole weld with just the TIG torch, no filler, and just smoothed it out to kind of blend it in to match the casing a little bit. I didn't just want a raw weld look, so I'll show you there. So all I've got to do now is just trim up the back bit to get that round cap to fit in there with a die grinder. I'll quickly do that, and then when it's all finished, I'll show you. So it's all back together, all the gears work, no problem. I'm presuming it's going to be rebuilt and stripped, so might be a few metal filings and stuff in there, but it's all back together, it all works, everything lines up, there's nothing sticky or tight with it. I'll just give you a quick look. So I just whizzed over it with a wire wheel just to clean up some of the welds, but the cap back in the back all fits alright. Just put a couple of centre punch dots in here just to stop that cap falling out. But yeah, overall quite pleased with that. So overall not a too bad little project, all turned out alright in the end. A little bit time consuming just cleaning the alley and stuff, but yeah, it was alright. So hope you enjoyed the video. Like and subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one.